Panel. My name is Kush Kumar. I'm the CEO and founder of Thinktree, an international professional association. And we have a range of subject matter experts, ambassadors, and also some featured people from our industry of health and well-being. Our discussion today is recovering your business and what will be required to work in a COVID environment. Now, we are aware that the landscape is continually changing, as is the advice and guidance. So this is a snapshot of where we are right now. And of course, we would urge everybody to take guidance and advice that is alive and current. As we continue our journey through these unprecedented times, we are now looking at recovery and what that means for our industry of health and well-being. Our therapists, students, course providers have had their careers, finances, and mental health impacted. So not to mention thousands of clients who are suffering quietly. So mental, physical, and emotional health being very, very important to everybody. And this is not just a UK thing. Obviously, this is a global thing. So we have a range of experts here who are going to try and navigate our way through with some guidance, support, and advice, which hopefully is going to be useful to you. So we've got a set of questions that I'm going to pose to the panel. And after we've gone through these questions, we'll have those who are tuned in an opportunity to ask questions themselves. And that if you can use the chat box at the bottom, and then we can pose a question either to the individual panelist or to the team as a general question. So I'd like to start off by posing the first question to Maureen Abson, who is our Thinktree, one of our Thinktree managers, and also runs Fusion Massage. So Maureen, what's the current government advice and guidance that we're being given, would you say?
Okay. Well, I'm glad you gave me the first question, because this will only take about 2 hours. It is being updated constantly. The last update on the UK, on the main government website, was only the 23rd of June. So it is changing almost weekly. The key thing with wherever you are in the UK is that you have to have a risk assessment. If you don't have a risk assessment, you're not working legally. Specifically a COVID-19 risk assessment. Some of the things that they're covering are fairly basic, like hand washing, making sure that your client's washing their hands when they come in. If you haven't got hand washing, having sanitizer. If you've got more than one practitioner in the room working in the building, you need to make sure that you've not got pinch points of time, you've not got crossover of clients arriving. We need to be asking clients to arrive on their own, if possible. Only working by appointments, which probably most of us do anyway. One of the key things informing our clients how we're working, things like if you want to wear a mask, and we'll come on to that, you need to inform your clients in advance that you need them to be wearing that. We should be working on shortened appointment times. Now, there's no guidance around what that is. There was an original mooting of 15 minutes, which thankfully went out because, you know, which bit of the body do you treat in 15 minutes? So you just have to be able to justify within your risk assessment what your timings are and showing how you've shortened them. We need to be asking the COVID-19 screening tests about any symptoms, who they've been in contact with, taking their details to track and trace, but still in line with GDPR. So we can't use them for marketing. We can't be sending information out on that. Ventilation is one of the big ones, so working with the windows open. Air conditioning at first was a complete no-no. That is now, it depends on your air conditioning. If it's not being recirculated, then that's now seen as okay, but checking that it's not going between rooms. The ventilation one is going to be interesting, I guess, once we get into November, December, because it's quite nice working now with the window open, but you know, once it's -5 outside and lashing down, then working with the window open is going to be tricky. Cleaning and sanitizing, I'm certainly spending 30 minutes cleaning for every 55 minutes I'm spending treating, avoiding cross-contamination, so make sure that you don't wear your work clothes at home, go to work, get changed, change as soon as you come back in the house. The PPE, there's regional variations on this. It depends where you are. In England and Wales, visors are mandatory, masks are highly recommended. In Scotland, masks are mandatory and visors are highly recommended. Sorry, Northern Ireland is the same in England as England for all of the legislation. We did start out by being told we had to have a separate PPE bin. That's now not the case. It can go in any bin so long as it's not in your recycling bin, unless you're self-isolating, and then it has to. So you can go with a PPE bin if you want, but you don't have to. Toilets have things like they have to have the government hand washing guidelines up in the toilets. There is a lot of concern, of course, around, there's a lot of Facebook chatter around blood clots and whether we should be massaging or not, particularly when people can be asymptomatic for COVID. I've dealt with this personally I've put questions onto my client consultation about have they had any chest pain, back pain, calf pain, any swelling, any unexplained rashes, any swollen toes, and anything like that. I'm sending them straight to their GP because I'm not qualified to be saying, yes, I think you've got a blood clot. I mean, unless it's very obvious in the leg, but I would then be sending them. So I'm not doing any additional tests for that. I'm just doing additional questions. And although COVID is normally asymptomatic, thankfully blood clots rarely are. You would normally have some kind of symptom to look for. I've talked very fast there. There's a long list of things really to go through. I have got the links to all of the England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales guidance that we can probably put up later, because they're the things that are being constantly updated.
And I know, Morgan, you've been obviously updating our Facebook page with relevant information as it's in and everything else, and that's great. That's really good, and obviously, like you've said, things are changing. But the bit about, if we don't have the prerequisite knowledge and skill and taking risks, I think that's very, very important. What's your view on that, Toh? Are you there, Toh? You're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute. Toh, can you hear us? Yeah, you're on mute.
Oh, how about that?
Right. So, listening to what Maureen was saying, and this is obviously guidance and advice she's gathered from government websites and agencies. What's your view on what she was saying?
Well, risk. I was going to talk about risk, and risk is relative. I would say risk. How we look at risk as a GP and how we manage risk every day is that looking at it, and it depends where you are. It depends the overall prevalence of coronavirus, and at the moment it's low. And despite what everyone says, this country has done an amazing job at controlling the virus, and it's keeping local outbreaks under control. So if they tell us to lock down, then that's the time you've got to stop working. So the goal of the government now is to get us to return to as much normal working as possible. So I think we need to take the precautions like that they tell us in their guidance and just work as normal as much as we can. And if it locks down, it locks down. The thing is not to let fear petrify us into running a non-financially viable business, especially you, and going bankrupt because of fear. But the fear right now, it's probably unwarranted because of the extremely low prevalence. I think we have to trust, I think, in the government guidance. At first, in the early days, I didn't know who had coronavirus. I had a few patients die. It wasn't funny, but now we have testing and tracing. The moment anyone has symptoms, they need to get tested. They self-isolate until they get the results of that test, and the whole family does so. As long as everyone knows to do their duty, we should be kept safe. And I think we have to remember that.
And do we all feel that wherever we go, that's what we're seeing? Are we seeing this happening? Are you as a panel, are you confident that people are engaging in the advice and the guidance and taking the support? Or is it something that maybe a proportion of people, a large proportion, are taking and some aren't? Anybody?
I think there's a lot of confusion. I think there's a lot of confusion, and because of the devolved nations and all the different, and I think for some people that's quite overwhelming. So they don't really know what to follow. And I think there might be cases where people are inadvertently not doing what they could be doing or should be doing, because the minds are just blown by, and like you said before, Kush, it's changing sometimes on a daily basis. I mean, we all know what happened with Scotland, poor Scotland. You know, it was like, they can go back 24 hours later, actually, no, you're not. And then it was like a week of uproar. And I just think, I think there might be people, you know, no judgment, but there might be people who are not necessarily following the guidelines. But I'm not convinced that that's their fault necessarily. Okay. They just don't know what to do.
David Balen from Balens Insurance. How has this impacted on you and the kind of cover people have?
Massively. I would echo what everyone said so far. I mean, we've been also posting regularly on our website. So we've been totally overwhelmed with clients ringing us up and asking us questions, which really one would have hoped their professional associations or their training colleges or someone would have given them that information, but somehow they've been looking to us, which, you know, of course we help where we can, but we've been flooded. And the sorts of questions we've been getting, you know, mirror what you were saying earlier, Tracey. There's so much confusion. I mean, I had the Scottish massage people come to me about, you know, we've been told by a Scottish member of Parliament that therapeutic massage is classed in the same thing as osteo and chiro, and we've had this letter which confirms we can go back to work, and this was weeks and weeks ago. And I said, are you sure? Because they're even more conservative than the UK. And it turns out that was wrong, and that had Scottish Parliament letterhead on it, you know. So, I mean, even amongst those ranks, you know, there's confusion, as you say, with the devolved Parliament. So, yeah. But there's been that side of it, is that when can we go back to work? Well, you know, we're not, you know, this is a public health issue. It's not an insurance issue. When it moves into public health, law comes in and it governs all of us, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, whether we agree with, you know, the negative media messages, which is all about avoiding contact rather than boosting your own system. I'm sure, Leyla, you'll have a lot to talk about there. But yeah, it drives me nuts. I just wish I've switched off from watching the media, because it is so, in a way, distorted that it's not really helping people with their decision making. So yeah, we've been hit a lot by that. The other side of it is the confusion around business interruption insurance for people that have premises, which I think I've talked before on your webinars about. And that's been massively confusing, because people think, well, my business has been interrupted, it must be a claim. Well, we're not, you know, they aren't insuring pandemics. So there's a whole court case going on with the Financial Conduct Authority at the moment. And we're kind of in the middle trying to bridge for our clients and try and fight the corner of the client with the insurers. It's been, I thought I was going into semi-retirement, but it doesn't feel that way at all.
I think yeah,
a lot's going on. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so just sorry, yes, Maureen.
One of the other areas that is still causing confusion, I should have mentioned, is facial work, any area around the face. At the moment, we had the big announcement from Boris about that from the 1st of August, all of this can happen again in England. That's not yet reflected on the government website. It's still at the moment saying that that's on hold till a later date. The other devolved nations are saying it's strongly recommended not to, but it's not an embargo on doing it. So it is, the language around it is very confusing, which I imagine, David, for you must be a nightmare.
It is, but I think someone said it earlier, I think you said it earlier, about informing clients and the risk assessment. And what I would add, if I may, is if you have an audit trail and that you show that you've done your best possible efforts to ensure that the zone is safe, that your clients understand what it is you're doing, what you're not doing, that you kind of communicate this to them before they hit your room, you know, because once they're in the room, you know, you could be in a complaining situation because they could say, well, you didn't tell me beforehand if I'd have known X, Y, and Z. So the thing I think is to deal with the expectations before they come into your space and to have an audit trail. And I would agree, questionnaire. In Holland, our clients there went back in May and the associations all got together and they designed this questionnaire, which is pretty thorough. And the clients fill it in before they come, and then they fill in this COVID questionnaire when you're there, just in case there's been any changes. I mean, surely we're all doing our common law duty to do the best we can. If you can demonstrate that, then I think you're on much safer ground. I don't know about the face thing. We've got a lot of clients who do work on the face, as you can imagine, because our spectrum goes from A to Z in terms of therapies, you know, all the way up to chiros and osteos and beyond. So working on the face, you know, is an issue. But I don't quite understand, if you're with someone for 45 minutes in close proximity, whether you work on the face or whether you work at the other end of the body. At the end of the day, you're still in each other's air zone. So I don't understand why working on the face is necessarily any more risky, because you're around each other. You know what I mean? So in close proximity. So what I would say is we don't have an exclusion on our policies. So our insurance wordings are very, very open. So when people say, well, will you allow us to do this, that, and the other? We have to say, well, the policy is silent because it is so open. But the problem is that you're being ruled by the law. So if you break the law, then the policy doesn't respond. So that's the dynamic really that's operating. It's a level up from all of us. We have to, as it were, interpret what they're trying to tell us as best we can. The only thing I want to flag up, if I may just quickly, and then I'll zip it, is that a number of insurers are starting to put a coronavirus exclusion. Now, they're going to put them on the premises policies. That's an absolute given. But we've seen worrying signs in the continent on our Europe business where one of the major insurers is slapping on a COVID exclusion. And that means you can't, you know, it's like the exclusion is longer than the recital clause on the policy. It's massive. But it's been obviously designed by lawyers to prevent any smell, or any link or any connection with COVID. Now, ours aren't doing that, but I'm just warning people, check out, you know, because that could be coming as well.
That's some really good advice there, David. I really appreciate that. And you know, one of the important things that we discuss here is candid, and we're open about, you know, what we feel and what we know, because I think that's what our therapists, our students, our course providers need. And leading on from that question, the next question, and Paula, if you can take the lead on this one, is as therapists yourselves, what guidance can you give other therapists to manage expectations of their clients? Now, I know we talked, Maureen brought up, and then David, you reiterated the same thing about the risk assessment, and Toh did as well. And, you know, we've designed a couple of free courses about risk assessment where you can download the template if that's what you need, and that's great. But as therapists yourselves, what kind of guidance are you giving other therapists, or would you give them to manage the expectation of the clients? So Paula, if you could lead on that one.
I've frozen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
I think I froze in the middle of that bit.
Sorry. So the question to you was, as therapists yourselves, what guidance can you give other therapists to manage the expectations of their clients?
Right. I think I'm back there. I think I froze there for a little bit there, Kush. So
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, it's my end, I think. I just always hits a slight unstable bit. Yeah, I'm in Northern Ireland, And, you know, I've been back in clinic for the last 3 weeks, since the 6th of July. We're one of the first group back. So I've got almost a month's worth of experience of working directly in clinic with the guidelines and everything else. So I've got some insights into this. And, you know, I back up absolutely what everyone else has said so far as well. Absolutely correct with the risk assessment. And what I found is making sure that if all my paperwork and my prior information was in place, so that they have an email prior to exactly what to expect, to what to wear, to what to bring, what's going to happen. You know, as they walk towards me, I'm firing a thermometer gun at them, you know, it's a laser, and they're like, whoa, what's going on here? And, you know, they're expecting all of these little pieces. I hand them a face mask. They're already pre-informed. And because they're pre-informed, there's a much reduced anxiety. And then in the middle of all of this, I found that absolutely totally valuable. And I picked up a whole load of little hints and tips here that from a client perspective, it's kind of, there's two separate camps. There's the ones who are totally compliant and will follow anything you say. And there's the other group that is, oh, don't worry about all of that. We don't need to bother with all of this, or they're taking their mask down, or they're, you know, and I've had to be quite firm sometimes and you know, say, I need this, or this can't occur, this treatment. But I found that my prior information, the detail of the prior information, the client intake forms, all of that, if I've captured all of that prior to, the sessions run really smoothly. And in terms of gaining financial efficiency and efficiency generally in the clinic, I'm fortunate I have 2 rooms available. So I'll be treating in one while the other one is being cleaned. And that's been cleaned. Then we just move around. Nobody crosses over. So I have somebody who's working to do that. And that's very useful, because then the efficiency of the clinic is meeting as many clients as I can within the remit as well. So we're not treating more than 6 people in a day. And I've changed all that, the linen side of things. This is the really key one, is start finding your professional launder now, before you go back, if you're not back already, because it turns into a tiny mountain. And we've got an Airbnb here as well, so we've got double the laundry going on with PPE and everything else, so it's completely crazy. But if you follow all the guidelines directly, and you put in all the paperwork, you know, in each little slot, we have had no issues going back to clinic, and we're in regular clinic now like it always was. It's almost like it's a new normality that has no stress behind it. And I think what Toh was saying there as well is really key, is just follow the guidance, stay calm, and it's all absolutely fine. And this will pass eventually, you know, and it already is passing step by step, we're starting to see. But I'm holding very tight on PPE. The other one is for therapists is the rustling apron scenario. That's driven me nuts for the first week. Saying, how do I find a non-rustling apron? So I switched to scrubs. So now I'm in scrubs. So I get out of my pajamas in the morning, get back into a set of pajamas, a different type, and it's really incredibly comfortable. So then I changed the scrubs from scrub to scrub between clients, and it's so noticeable how clients don't care. You know, the fact you've got a visor on, the silly Harry Potter glasses, the mask, you know, scrubs, you know, they've got clowns all over them, some of them. They're not seeing any of that. They're just seeing the professional treatment and the opportunity. And I found 99% the clients are so pleased we are back in clinic full stop, and reaching those, you know, very specific people who are in serious pain. I think the relief factor here is massive. And
so
yeah,
on that note, Paula, and before we open it up to people like Christine, Marc, Tracey, Maureen, and Leyla, have you had to adapt the duration of the treatment? Yeah.
I mean, the treatment time we would be using is like a whole 60 minutes, but now we've dropped it to the obligatory 45 and saying is the maximum treatment time, which is things that I would do. I do PDTR, Bowen, anatomy and motion. I can achieve that. And it just means that they're getting more sessions than normally would do. So sometimes I would have treated an hour and a half, sometimes for biomechanical assessment or full assessment. And now we just split that into 2 treatments during the week. Obviously, there's been no COVID changes, you know, within the people involved, yeah, and the families they're in contact with.
Thanks for that. Christine, have you got anything you want to add to that? And then Marc, if you want to, after that. No?
Yes, Paula, it's interesting what you were saying in terms of the duration of the treatments. Some of the conversations I've been having is that actually therapists, if they're seeing less clients, are doubling up their treatment time. So some are not working for any less than an hour and a half, a 90-minute treatment, because if we're seeing less, do you see what I'm saying? It's interesting that different people with different approaches to it, really.
You've got dualities all over the place, and I think it's just, if you can get totally comfortable, like David said as well, that you get totally comfortable that your paperwork, your systems, your compliance is absolutely on point, then you have demonstrated and contributed to the protection of this country, yourself and your clients directly. And if that has been achieved, and you've done it to the full ability of your abilities, then you feel safe. You shouldn't be in fear. I think we're really right about this whole feeling in a position of like stuck and in fear, and taking that reaction away, especially when it comes to therapies, when we're providing the exact opposite to that most of the time. We're providing relaxation and an environment to escape the normal stress of society and work. I've worked very hard to make sure those elements stay in place while taking every guidance. And I found it absolutely fine. I haven't had any issues other than I don't really want to wear a mask, and then having that discussion because I didn't read the email, and that's it,
So, I mean, to be fair, in a practical sense, I say, okay, the duration, it sounds like we've got either halved or doubled, which is an inconsistency in itself. What about Leyla? What about in your field of what you're doing with nutrition and well-being? How are you managing with that? Is it because you may be doing less practical? It's more of a consultation scenario.
Yeah, I mean, the fortunate thing about nutrition and herbal medicine is that you don't, aside from looking at a person's eyes and tongue, you can get quite a lot of information, mainly from what they say. There has been a massive increase in people asking about immunity, and at the moment we're getting a lot of calls from people with compromised immunity, particularly people with cancer. We have a lot of clients that have cancer, and they're really, really scared, and they're the ones that need the most assistance. So they seem to be very comforted by, we've done a lot of informative articles about nutrition, like ways to support immunity naturally, diet, because they've kind of been forced into we've all been forced into a kind of sedentary lifestyle, eating habits. A lot of people have gained weight. A lot of people have stopped exercising. A lot of people have started drinking more, eating more kind of the easy foods like packaged foods, processed foods. There's also a lot of low mood out there. And so thankfully, we've interacted with a lot of clients who want to understand how to improve their nutrition in order to get through this environment. But there's a noticeable panic among people with compromised immunity specifically. And I would encourage all practitioners that are working with that particular type of client to point them towards good nutrition information, because nutrition, your innate immunity is your first line of defense. And there are ways to destroy that, such as by not moving around, not eating well, not drinking well, not sleeping well, but also by doing things such as there's specific diets, specific supplements, nutrients, things like that, that can really, really help. And it also gives people a sense of power, a sense of control over what they can do for themselves to make sure that they feel safe in themselves, and that they have the energy that they need and the resilience that they need to, get through whatever it is that they're getting through. But we've had, I would say 90% of our callers are people with compromised immunity. They have a condition, they're stuck at home, they're panicking, their appointments have been cancelled, they're doing a lot of guesswork, so they're buying a lot of supplements that may or may not be helpful. So having a sequence of events, like a sequence of set advice that everybody can give, can really help them, because we've seen people that have been kind of hemorrhaging money on relatively useless supplementation, and actually 1 or 2, 3 habits, daily habits, can go a long way in terms of supporting innate immunity. And I would encourage all practitioners to familiarise with those things in case they end up having that conversation with an immune compromised or any person, really.
I mean, that's quite interesting, Leyla, because that's not just your clients, that's you as an individual as well.
Yeah.
And I guess most of your consultation can be done on the phone, can be done through Zoom or other platforms. But yeah. Tracey, how are you managing? I mean, because you offer practical treatments and things, and you do things like online. Sorry, just before I come to Leyla, did you want to finish off with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, with the online and the phone, I think it's very important to have a phone, because the older clients who are not that tech savvy, who maybe don't have a smartphone, or they don't have, you know, WhatsApp, and they don't understand all of that, they're very alone already. Through social isolation, they've not been seeing friends and family with the same frequency that they have been. That in itself is damaging to their health. They may or may not have a condition. So I would always phone those clients, because they don't speak that language of Zoom and Skype and WhatsApp and things like that. And I found that that's been a really good. I've not had a landline for a very long time. I've installed a landline now, so that the more patients over a certain age are still included in that wellbeing conversation, because we send out emails, we do Facebook posts, we do WhatsApp broadcasts, but we're not reaching those people. And so I would just say, like, you know, phone calls to those kinds of people I find very, very, very helpful for them.
Yeah, and I think you're right there, because obviously looking at the maturer side of life, who may be not up with technology, as you're saying, but obviously sometimes are more remote than the majority of us living in families, because they might be widowed, living on their own, or whatever. Okay. So, Tracey, you're going to talk about consultation online.
Yeah. So what I'd like to offer is the opportunity to think about somewhere in between what you were saying, you know, people who want to stay within these guidelines of keeping your appointment to 45 minutes, but how do you fit it all in? And one of the things that I've been really promoting almost for, well, I put out a free training the day after lockdown began in how to do this stuff online, because the way I'm presenting it to people is you could run your consultation and your physical assessment online. So those people who do even some of the special orthopedic tests, even a walking assessment or whatever you're doing, that can all be done through Zoom, online. And the idea of, and I've done this and I've created this for people, using an online scheduling app to create, for people to book their appointment through that. With those, you can get them to fill all the forms in. You can make all of your forms up exactly as you need, including your COVID screening, including your intake form, everything, when they book the appointment. And what then happens is you get them to book 2 appointments. They have, and what we're doing is you have a consultation day and then you have a client day. And on the consultation day, you sit and you give them your time, and you can still take your time, make that connection over Zoom. And then the next day they come in and they have their 45 minutes, and it's all hands on. Because one of the government guidelines, I'm sure Maureen will agree, is that they describe talking as a high risk activity. The more you talk in the room, that's considered, you know, to be worse. So if you can do all of the preparation the day before, and exactly as Leyla was saying, you know, you can adapt this to people who aren't techie, who you can do it over the phone. But that idea of getting that job done and having like a session of that the day before, and preparing them, as Paula said, giving them all the information, you know, exactly what's going to happen, what to expect. You know, we have whole reams of, I've created welcome packs that you can send to your clients with all of that in, what to expect when you arrive, all that around, you know, text us when you arrive, please wait in your car, if you stand outside, keep 2 meters apart, we will come and collect you, all that kind of stuff. And like you say, it takes away a lot of the anxiety. And I just wanted to say a little thing about the facial treatments. I guess, you know, I'd want to. So, you know, TMJ, yeah, you know, that was the minute all this happened, I was like, okay, what's going to happen to all these poor people with TMJ? And the thing is that I can kind of understand why this is the high risk zone, because at the end of the day, even with a visor or a mask or anything, if you're right in front of the face and then they inadvertently sneeze or cough, well, you know, it's right at you, which is a bit different than being in the same room. And what we're doing is for our students who are studying TMJ right now, we're giving them risk assess, what else can we do to still work really effectively with the TMJ without being in the high risk zone. So one of the things that we're doing is obviously the work that we do prone, the TMJ is fine, but then treating them seated for, you know, working the temporalis and the SEM, but standing behind them. You can still stand behind. So there's always things that you can do. And until the facial is given, you know, government, as you say, Maureen, actually on the website, that we can start that from the 1st of August. I've said to my therapists, even then, I still want you to stand behind as much as you can. If you're going to treat the masseter, stand behind. You can still treat from, you know, still do as much as you can to mitigate risk, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
I mean, that's really interesting, and that's really, really useful, Tracey. And I think one of the things that you're all kind of talking about is modification and being flexible. So, David, how does that impact on the insurance policies they have for a specific treatment that they're offering? And then all of a sudden there's flexibility, there's change, maybe duration, maybe they're working slightly differently. Is that going to have any impact, or is that just what's your thoughts on that? And then
let me turn your question on its head, if I may. It's up to someone to prove that you've been negligent,
right?
You know, and that's quite tricky to do, isn't it? If you think about it. In fact, how can you actually prove someone's given you COVID? Or you've given them COVID. You know, these things are very difficult and can be very long-winded to try and unpick legally. But I think in terms of the insurance, I revert back to what I said about it's a public health issue. So what is the guidance on working now? That they specifically talked about close contact and not working on the face. So the fact they've talked about it means that, as I understand it, I was on another webinar and they were saying, well, you have a visor and you have a mask and the client has a mask. And I think other than being in a spacesuit, I'm not quite sure what else you can do, really, other than maybe everyone goes in a sheep dip before and after. I mean, I think we have to get reasonableness into the argument, because, you know, the whole of law and in terms of negligence is based on reasonableness. And, you know, on the balance of probabilities, was someone being negligent to that other party? So I think rather than saying, well, is it or isn't it acceptable, if the guidance says you can't, then our hands are tied. If you, Tracey, have got a workaround where you're not working on the face directly, which I think is what they're talking about, if you can work on it from behind, but then are they saying they're not even mitigating it? They're just saying you can't work on the face directly until we say so.
There's so much ambiguity around everything, and that's where I think we all get confused. Christine, you wanted to say something, and then Paula.
Well, I wanted to say two things. The first thing I wanted to say is I think this whole thing has indicated just how poorly the government understands our industry. I think they have failed miserably to really listen to the people who have been in this industry for decades. And they're writing things that they really don't understand themselves. So I think the first thing is, as an industry that brings in billions of pounds a year into the UK, that they need to take a stronger role in understanding what it is we do and the scope of what we do. I think everything from facials to massage to health and nutrition to wellness in general. The fact that they still use language like massage parlors just about made me want my head to explode. They have no clue. And so they're writing things that they really don't understand. So I think as an industry, we need to have a much stronger voice when it comes to government guidelines and policies. As for working on the face, we always taught in school, at ITech and various other places, you always did the face from behind anyway. You did most of your treatments from behind the head. Of course, unless you're doing extractions and so on. But for the most part, I think it's quite safe to be able to say that you can do a facial behind the person. You know, obviously you have to take their mask off if you're going to massage a client's face. But again, that's easy to do from behind the person. If you've got a mask on as the practitioner, you've got your mask on, you've got your shield on. I think it's perfectly fine to do a treatment from behind. But I wanted to talk about cancer care in the age of COVID, because that has changed a lot. And you might know a lot of my practices in the US, but also I have clients in Ireland. So what I am seeing is that the older clients that are living with compromised health will just follow the guidelines or whatever the doctor says. And again, it's a GP, not the oncologist necessarily. But the younger people living with cancer, particularly those that are in constant care, maybe with blood cancers, for instance, where they're in constant care for maybe 3 or 4 years, and they're 2 years in and they know what their bodies can tolerate. They're younger, they're much better at advocating for themselves, will say, I really want to see my practitioner, my wellness specialist, my massage therapist. And we don't seem to have any problem with that. I've certainly not had any issue with still conducting a cancer care treatment under the right guidelines, of course. But I just found that there was a huge disparity between younger clients and older clients. The older clients were still afraid to come out because they've been told not to, and because they have compromised immune systems, stay away from anybody if they're going to touch you. And yet we see that the mental health is the next pandemic. We have many people suffering from mental health issues already. And then you add the fact that their treatment has been interrupted because of COVID. So now you've got another layer of anxiety to deal with. And then you take away the most basic human right of touch, therapeutic touch. And now it's just a whole mess, quite frankly. So we have to advocate for everybody who's going through cancer treatments at the moment, because we know that there's been interruptions to their schedules. So I think, again, it's part of the bigger picture of not really knowing what we do as a group of professionals, that perhaps we could have integrative oncology, that we could have the oncologist saying, this is a good idea for you to have this type of treatment, but not this type of treatment. Now, we know that because we teach it, and we've been doing this a very long time. But again, it's just lack of awareness and lack of information and lack of I would say, guidance from any kind of government body.
Can I just bring in Toh in that one? Because I know, Toh, you are very much involved in integrative health, and you have a good understanding of our industry. What are your thoughts on what Christine's saying here about the understanding of our therapies and how they work, and raising also part of the next question, which was going to be about anxiety levels, about mental health issues, and my own gut feeling is the same as Christine's there, that our next wave of concern is going to be around mental health, and that's not just those who already are suffering with mental health issues, but those who maybe weren't so much on that suffering stage are now beginning to, because of the lockdown, because of this, living alone or anxiety. What are your thoughts on that one?
Hi. So I think what I like to say is that every decision we make carries a risk, and every risk needs a decision. So that's every risk needs a decision, and everything we do carries a risk. So we can't escape risk. So I think what I'm gathering is a lot of you have just returned to work, whereas we've been working throughout the whole thing. And yes, it's frustrating, it changes every day. But and I think, the fact that the government's just letting us back into, letting you back to work, or the public back to work, it's because they think it's safe. Right. Any contact in an enclosed space for more than 20 minutes in a room, doesn't matter what you wear, chances are, you have a good chance of catching it if you're with someone who's infected. So you have to rely on the public health guidance. If they have a symptom, the most important thing you do is, like you said, screen them beforehand. But everyone should know. But you can do that as well. What you don't need to do is don't need to check temperatures and all that. So with regards to, say, working together. It's difficult at the moment. We can't even work together with the hospitals at the moment. Everyone's sort of doing their own thing to understand the guidance at this point in time. Yes, the government quite doesn't understand it, but they've sort of grouped you with beauty, therapists, any close contact thing, which yeah, it changes all the time. Just take their current guidance. I can't say there's any concerted plan against anyone else. They're trying to do their best. And see, they've gotten rid of the scientific advisors because the scientific advisors every time they go, they talk about, risk. They talk about, well, everything's a risk. It's just a balance of risks. And I think if we're going to treat people, and I think close proximity contact is in complementary and alternative medicine is the cornerstone of therapy, really being with someone. I think we can't stop that, and our responsibility maybe is to reduce how their anxiety, like we said before, not be militant on, yes, you have to do this, you have to do that, because that annoys. Well, we found certainly initially my staff were the same, my nurses and phlebotomists and healthcare assistants insisted everyone had to use the hand sanitizer, have to wear a face mask. And then they saw that some people were getting breathless, some people were getting anxious. And now they just say, if they don't come in with one, that's fine, because people are allowed exceptions. And in fact, some of my patients who've been wearing them have an oxygen level that's far too low to wear a mask anyway. And then when you ask them to take it off, they go, now, and also, there is an exception with masks. I quite like to say that, they can just print it out themselves. There's an exception thing. So don't, it's not for us to challenge it. You can say anyone can print this out to say that they have an issue with, with wearing masks. I think we have to be too anxious as long as there are public health measures in place. With regards to the dark side of the pandemic, it's gotten a lot of people worried about something we don't know about, and we didn't know about for at that time. And then we had to take these drastic measures. So unfortunately, it's going to cause long-standing fears and anxieties in many people, as is predicted by a few papers already out on the mental health impact of COVID-19. So I suppose it's good for those of you in therapies, it's in some ways, EFT, havening hypnosis, to name a few. And they state problems arise from worry, not just about the condition, but also worry about the future, about jobs, about housing, about social isolation. That's all the current data. So I'll take this opportunity to encourage any one of you, anyone you feel is socially isolated, to perhaps contact their surgery and ask about maybe being referred to what they call social prescribers who can get you, the people who are socially isolated out there to speak to people. And I know you play a big role in, because sometimes they won't come and see the doctors, they'd rather discuss it with you or see the complementary therapists. In fact, I think complementary therapists have played a huge role, because certainly for us, physiotherapists have been shut down. And one of the first people to start, are the chiropractors, the osteopaths. I know they've been doing a lot of work which needs hands-on work. I saw one mistake the other day that the physios have been treating remotely on video, and they've just made a wrong assessment because they haven't put their hands on the person. And so I think you have a huge role to play in all that. And we know that mental health is really important, because poor mental health is a really strong correlation with poor physical health. So I think
that's really interesting, and it's really good to see or to hear, certainly, that GPs like yourself, and I know we've been involved in your integrative health, that who think like that. So that's good. But sort of that's one thing. But Leyla, we're told a lot about the impact of coronavirus and what it does to you as individuals, maybe as therapists, or just as human beings. How can we help ourselves? How can we, we've got the fear. We're constantly fed the fear of, it can do this, and be careful of that, and we can't do this. Okay, we get that. And that, I think, it's given us a dip, in our own mental health. And those who are, well, at homeostasis will think we're managing. But what could we do? I'd like to know what, what I could do, what any of our panel or our listeners could do to help themselves. Simple steps.
Okay, so I would say there's maybe 3 golden rules like 3 easy golden rules that everyone can do that will support their health. And I think the first one is to have a routine. So a lot of people really don't understand how important it is for your overall health to have a routine, a wake time, a sleep time. So I've been on various Zoom meetings where people are kind of like still in their pajamas, they've not had a shower because they're not going to work. And what they're not realizing is that being out of that routine of getting up, having a shower, getting dressed, or whatever your routine is, it's really important for what your body knows what's going on. Your body knows that there's been a disruption. This is essentially what jet lag is. It's being out of your routine. So I would say first and foremost, if you've fallen out of a routine, try to follow a routine, get up at the same time every day, do a set sequence of actions every day, particularly in the morning and in the evening, because that routine is what kind of leads to good, healthy sleep later. So your morning routine and your evening routine, I would say, are good additions to your overall health. The second thing I would say is try to eat a rainbow. So every day, try to have as many different food group, different colour foods as possible. For parents, I would say don't get too stressed what your child is eating by a day-by-day basis. Assess them over a whole week, otherwise you'll just go completely crazy. And for yourself as well. So if you've got into a bit of a bad habit and maybe today you've had 3 colours instead of 6 colours of food, don't be too hard on yourself and don't consider yourself as having fallen off a wagon. Just keep going and you'll eventually get there. And then the third thing I would say is remember to interact with other people. So even though we're not going out for dinners, we're not going to parties and so on and so forth, like take time out to call your loved ones and laugh, just talk about things that are not to do with the virus, that are not to do with masks. And those 3 things essentially are really good things that will generate a health within your body. So I would say those are 3 really easy, simple things that absolutely everyone can do.
And yes, and I totally agree with that. And I think everybody's nodding, so I think they've got, we're all thinking the same, because there is a kind of an easy way to fall into something else. Oh, well, I'm not going to work, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. And I think at the beginning it was a bit of a kind of something quite, oh, I'm not going to work and I can do. But then after a while, that social interaction has so much impact for us all. Yeah. And talking about kind of social interaction and we were encouraged, and we've certainly been involved, I think Tree have been involved in a lot of online courses and pushing this, that, the other. But in our industry, as Toh's mentioned, as David's mentioned as well, where we are people who need people and interact. And so I'm going to ask Marc to lead on this about how do we manage the teaching and learning with the kind of rules and things, because I know you've already put some things in place, haven't you? Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So we were fortunate at the school. Obviously, our new intake, our new intake of students was in April, and we weren't very sure how students were going to feel about postponing the course. One of the things we put in place very early was the theoretical part of our courses. So we run massage diploma courses. Is we put in place live Zoom sessions for teaching things like anatomy, physiology, and theory. For shorter sessions, just for 2-hour sessions, normally we teach that in class. And most people were agreeable to doing it. And in fact, we had great fun. And we've just got our first set of exam results back for the theory part, and they were amazing. So we do shorter sessions, things like on a Friday evening we'd run a quiz night, so you could grab your fish and chips and your glass of wine and join in at a muscle quiz for half an hour. So the students really enjoyed it. It made the learning fun. So I think for the future, I think we need to think about where it's possible to teach theory and use things like Zoom, where they don't have to come into class. Obviously, that's going to be sort of mitigate some sort of contact risks. So we intend to keep, we've learned as we've gone along, and we've got better at using technology. And so we feel that we're in a really good place with all that. So I would certainly say, where you can teach theory, make it fun, shorter sessions, but regular sessions. Record the sessions so that if a student has to go off or isn't there, they can have access to what they've missed. We sent them sort of PDF downloads of all the notes as well. So I think that's one thing that we might want to think about. Now, obviously, in terms of practical work, our students now are all looking forward to September, where they've done their theory. Now they're going to come into class. And as we've said, you know, that it's uncharted territory. We don't know. I think most people we've spoken to are comfortable with coming in. And of course, they want to be assured or reassured that the teaching staff have done all the training, got the risk assessment in place. And I think it's important to let students know that, and also put it on your website as well, so that anybody who's thinking about signing up for a course, can just see that you're thinking along those lines and making a safe environment for them. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the massage. I mean, I think certainly smaller class sizes might have to be in place. So where you may have had 12 students, maybe 6 to 8 students, with obviously more spacing of couches. And again, we're keeping those practical days a lot shorter. We're going to sign people up with buddies. So, you think about what you're doing. You're bringing a group of strangers together, coming into a space. So we're going to assign people to one person. So whereas normally we'd encourage students to work with each other, different body types, different musculature, that's going to have to be restricted, and more sort of work, more case study work done at home in people's bubbles, and treating one person more than once. So things like that, budding up, keeping the couches nice and spaced. We're going to ask students to bring in their own towels and supply things like plastic boxes. So whereas normally if a student undressed for massage, put their clothes on the back of a chair, we won't have chairs. We can ask them to put their clothes in a plastic box with a lid. And then obviously, to minimize sort of contact and things like that as well. Things like bolsters. I mean, you've got to think about cleaning equipment down. So, using these sort of fluids on your couches, on your bolsters, it's going to have an impact on your equipment. So things like bolsters, we're saying, bring a towel in to roll up, bring your own towel in, things like that. You've got to think about aerating the room as well. So maybe having regular breaks, opening the doors, and letting some air flow through the room whilst people go off and have a bit of a break. We're not allowing students to use the kitchen area. They'll have to bring in their own food because obviously people tend to congregate around the kitchen area and things like that. So I think that's it. And just assigning people an area of the room, a buddy. And again, it's impossible to completely mitigate the risk. And we don't know how it's going to go, but I think people will feel safer knowing that we've got those measures in place. When it comes to facial work and head work, we have decided, there's something else I was going to say. When we do demonstrations, our tutors are going to demo together. So one tutor will demo on another tutor rather than on the student. But thinking about allowing students to film things if they need to, as well, to take home with them. Things like the facial routine, we're going to teach that, online. So, and then we're hoping that iTech will allow the submission of, the facial part of the routine as a recorded submission. We've adapted some of the way we teach massage, so a lot more prone work, so neck and shoulder massage with the client prone. Our deep tissue course, we've come up with some adaptations to work from behind the client as well. So thinking about adapting the way you teach massage as well would be I think the way to go.
I think the important thing is the outcomes, isn't it? The outcomes that the client receives. If the outcomes are there, then the technique can be modified, can be changed, and everything else. Maureen, are you doing anything differently, or does that kind of sound the kind of...
I'm pretty much doing exactly as Marc is doing, apart from they've got allocated mugs for drinks. So that's your mug for the week, and it's your responsibility to wash it and keep it in your plastic box when you go home at the end of the evening. But pretty much just identical to what Marc is doing in terms of the split, the adaptation of techniques, the adaptation within the classroom, pretty much word for word.
Anything I'd like to add, if I may, is that we're getting quite a lot of inquiries from, you know, schools and tutors and all the rest of it about doing the online stuff. And, you know, we've always had a very strong rule that we want people to come out and be competent and safe to be let loose on the public. So we've always insisted where there's an element of online work going on. I mean, perfectly fine what you've just described. But for me, it's like you were saying, Kush, the outcome. Okay, so how do we prove these people are safe to be let loose? So it's the examination process that we would be looking for. And also, how are the case studies and the practicals being assessed and done? So, I mean, I'm sure you're very creative and able to come up, or maybe have already come up with something. But for us, those are the only caveats. Other than that, we've already, before lockdown even, agreed for people to be doing online work. So that is the problem.
David, because on our own approval and accreditation process, we've now changed our policy for online, and I had that conversation with you, which you agreed, and so did other insurers as well, because, you know, coming from a teaching and learning education point of view, it's the outcomes, it's the assessment and how we do things. But, you know, in one respect, I think this is if I look at this as a fantastic opportunity for us to think about change. I mean, Christine, you talked about, you know, earlier on about we refer to as massage parlours, and, you know, had we been in the Victorian age, that would have been fine, but I think we've moved on a little bit. So we are adapting, we are looking at online, we are looking, so it's all about blended learning, you know, and some will work better than others. Some of it will be online specific, it's fine. Leyla, you mentioned, you know, when we're talking about the maturer people who are maybe not as tax savvy, how do they manage? So for course providers, and certainly as somebody who approves and accredits courses, as far as the quality assurance process is concerned, we are looking at that very thing David mentioned: assessment, learning outcomes. Are the students going to be competent and fit for purpose, but not just fit for purpose in terms of the course they've done, but also taking into consideration what we're going through at the moment, this you know, unprecedented COVID and one thing or another. So how are we going to look at things in the future? So we need to think about that. Just before we kind of round up, if those of you who are watching have got any questions you want to ask them, please put them forward. I think Leyla's got something that she wants to talk about here.
Yeah, there was just one thing that I wanted to say, which was to encourage everybody to, we're all extremely focused on COVID and working, and rightly so. I completely appreciate that. There are a few things with regard to our food at the moment that's going through government. They just recently tried to pass a bill to enable GM foods, for example, which will be, of course, a disaster for all of our health. So if it's okay with you, Kush, I'll send you some more information about that, because I think that's something very important that will affect our health that we need to get involved with as well.
Okay, that's Dr. Toh's had to go. Paula, did you want to mention something?
Yeah, it was from before, really. It was just a sort of, and, you know, it's just so lovely to see everybody here and meet a few fresh faces here, so it's great. But what I wanted to add is, I think for all of us in our industry, it has been a fantastic opportunity, which I've not witnessed before. The opportunity is one that, you know, with myself running Northern Integrative Health over the years, in the centre in the Northeast, NHS, pain management, all of that side, and us constantly bashing on to the government about regulation and about, you know, increasing the standards of our industry and things like that, and us all coming together to achieve that. I think this, awful this is, at the same time, it's a wonderful place for us to be, to actually demonstrate to our country and everyone around us just how incredible what our offer is across the board of therapies. And, you know, and I just think now is the time to just keep beating the drum and keep lobbying and not to be afraid of regulation. And the chances for us to increase our professional standards and to demonstrate that clearly through risk assessments, through insurers, that those are beautifully put, really eloquent. And, you know, I'm quite excited in amongst the sadness, if that makes sense. the sadness of the people we've lost, the sadness of the whole situation and the mental health side. But I think we can really rally now, and this is our, in many ways, our time. You know, it's been really, really sort of there and present and visible. Yeah, that's the positive part I wanted to.
No, brilliant. And I've just had something in from somebody called Jo Edwards, who has said she's found this very useful, interesting, and it's given her confidence to work with her clients. And thank you to you all for your time. And that's really important, isn't it? Because what we're trying to encourage here is for people to go in to their workplace, offer what they do with confidence. Yes, there's got to be adaptation. Tracey, have you got anything that you want to add as we finish?
No, just I totally agree with everything everybody said. What we're doing in terms of adapting how we teach, as you know, Kush, because I've run them through you.
Yeah.
So, for example, putting more stuff online, as everybody else has said. I've actually filmed a lot of my practical courses as well. But what I'm then offering to the students is they can do the course online, and they love the videos. They love the practical videos that they can watch. But then, because I've got, you know, other teachers around the country, what they can also do is volunteer to come and have a day, like a one-on-one training session with the teacher, so that you've kind of, it helps with the idea of having a lot of people in a room. It can be a one-on-one situation. They can really manage the space, really manage the time. And in terms of, for the classroom itself, exactly what Marc said. I mean, you've been to our venue. We're really lucky. It's a huge space with big high ceilings and doors we can fling open, and all the other, you know, adaptations that we'll do. But and what Paula was saying and what everyone's saying, I mean, we're very innovative. We've had to be down the years, haven't we? We've had to always, you know, kind of, you know, fight our corner, if you like, to be recognised for the professionals that we are. And I'm really heartened by, you know, the way we as a profession have been behaving in these last few months, finding new ways around it, because what we're all here to do at the end of the day is to help people.
I think you're spot on there, Tracey, and you know, just looking at you know, modern medicine is quite embryonic based on what's happened for thousands of years. And in thousands of years, we've had plagues, we've had destroying this, and people have still survived. And that kind of holistic approach, that kind of modification, that kind of looking at the nutrition, the exercise, the mental health, you know, keeping that spirit going. And I think it's okay for any of us to accept that we're not having a good day, and that's fine. You know, it's just a day, and tomorrow will be a better day. And it's that simplicity, because we also do get, we do fall into this of what we should be and what we should think. And to all of you therapists listening out there, and course providers and anybody else, you know, first law of nature, look after yourself.
Can I just say, Kush, something that's been quoted frequently by people throughout this, like yourself, I've been doing a lot of lives, a lot of just, we're going to have COVID coffee and catch up at 3 o'clock today. We've been having that every week. Just bring your brew, bring a cake if you want. Let's sit and just talk. How are you doing? And it always comes back around to work. And exactly what you said, I think there has been a lot of kind of, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And what I've been saying to our therapists and students is, right, look, here's how it is. One day you get up and you're cleaning the skating board with a cotton bud. The next day you're lying in bed drinking tequila and watching squirrels out the window. There's nothing, you know, and it's all fine.
That's a great insight into Tracey's week. So,
I was going to say, you've got a camera in my bedroom there, Tracey.
You're dressing up as a squirrel. Okay.
You're either up there or you're down there, and wherever you are, it's fine. The next day, it could all be different. So just keep on going.
Absolutely right. And you know, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's contributed and the powerful messages that you're giving. And I think as a collective for our industry, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, you know. we've had David, who's given us some great advice and guidance and you know, on the insurance side of things and what we should and shouldn't be maybe thinking about and where that comes. Maureen, thank you for all the updates. And course providers, you've all given us lots to think about as well. And also the fact that, you know, it's safe for people to come learn from you, have therapies from you. And you know, Leyla, brilliant, the fact that, you know, let's look after ourselves as well. So, you know, Boris is talking about, let's get the country moving, let's look after our own health and well-being. Absolutely. And this could be one of those times where we stop, we reflect, and we think about our own health and well-being. We move forward. Christine, you're absolutely right. And I know Christine and Marc, you're both involved in the SATCC about cancer treatments for cancer care, and that's shortly coming forward as well. But if anybody is interested, then we've got some free courses that we're offering from Think Tree for risk assessment. So you've got something in place, you've got some templates, and about preparing to work within the COVID world. And you know, you'll get your certificate for that as well, which has been welcomed worldwide actually. So we're all trying to do our best. And you know, and I know you're all part of Think Tree, and we're all singing from the same hymn sheet as well. So I'd like to, I think we've got another question just before we go. Oh, that was from Laura.
I wanted to just say one more thing, if I could.
Yes.
And it was just about, again, I think it sort of goes back to the fear factor, and there's so many unknowns about this, you know, novel virus, because it is novel and we don't really know some aspects of it. But I think what has failed to happen is that we have not given enough information about what you can do to increase your immune function, to help yourself. It's all of the don'ts. And we've approached it from a negative perspective throughout the whole thing. And rather than looking at it as, to your point earlier on, about ways of making ourselves well, how do you become well? If you've been sedentary and not in your office, you know, all of your career, and now you can't go into your office anymore, what can you do? And routine is so important, as you said, Leyla. Really important to keep to a routine, but also important to understand about nutrition. But if they gave us little nuggets of information, the government, so when they say wear a mask and wear gloves and do this and do that, what about if they actually said, make sure that you stay hydrated, make sure you get some sleep, make sure you talk to somebody about your feelings, make sure that you do eat nutritious food, instead of all of the things we shouldn't be doing. All the things that they want us to do, as I said, like the mask wearing, and avoid people, avoid touch. These are all things that make us human. This is, you know, the things that we're being asked not to do are the things that make us feel good. Generally.
You're right, Christy, and that's where therapists come in.
Yeah.
We look at the whole thing. So, you know, and that just highlights the importance of not giving up as a therapist, keep going. Because, you know, Tracey, you said it about supporting and helping people and helping the industry, and that's who we are and what we are.
Right.
So if we can manage to take all the advice we're giving everybody else and look after ourselves, then we're in a fantastic position to help others. So, you know, that's absolutely key. So thank you very much for being here, for being part of the panel. For everybody else who's watching, this will be available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel as well. That's thinktreehub.com. And so you can more than welcome to come and watch this and pass this on to whoever you need. We have an absolutely fantastic range of therapists and course providers that you can see in front of you, who are offering all sorts of courses and good advice on our website as well. And if you become a member, then obviously you'll get the newsletters that these people contribute to, because we've got subject matter experts here and ambassadors. So thank you very much. Have a good week and speak to you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Coach.
Bye. Bye.